Hello, this video is to go along with the midterm study guide. So remember that the midterm is a proctored exam. Please go to the midterm module for information on how to register for that exam. You have a few options, whether you want to take it at an Eastern Florida campus, or if you do not live close or cannot make it to a campus, then there are two other options, ProctorU, which is a paid service, or you could take the exam, if you live outside of Brevard County, you could take the exam at another college or university. So please review that information, and if you have questions on how to register, give me an email and I'll help walk you through that. The exam dates, it starts Monday the 13th and ends Monday the 20th, so also make sure that you register ahead of time and that you choose the day and time. Of course, Eastern Florida campuses, you have to look and see when their learning labs are open and when they have availability, so that way you don't wait and try to get in on a Sunday because they're not open on Sunday, so then that won't work. So please do that this week. Get your registration in if you have not already. The stories covered by the exam are the ones that we've read so far, so here's a list of those. And also the terminology that's posted in the week 1 module. So here is the terminology sheet. A lot of this should be familiar probably from high school English classes. So just these basic terms: plot, conflict, the point of view, setting, and so on. So read those over. Here are just a little bit of details about each story to help you focus in on exactly what you will be answering on the midterm. So the midterm is a combination of multiple choice and short answer. So for short answer, I do want complete sentences, but I'm not looking for entire paragraphs unless you need to write a paragraph to fully answer the question. That's fine. But in some of these cases, you could probably write a couple sentences and that'll work. You know, I don't really take off major points for grammar mechanics, but if I do look for capitalization, I look for complete sentences. You know, I try to be lenient with the other types of grammar mechanics that I may deduct from, you know, essays where you guys have time to work at home and you have a couple weeks to do, versus this is the midterm and I understand you're in there for 90 minutes. So I'm not going to be dinging a lot of points for grammar and whatnot, but I do want you to write in complete sentences. So starting with Young Goodman Brown, here are a few elements to pay attention to, starting with setting. So you want to go to the terminology and just make sure you understand. So if I say setting or symbolism or characters or irony, go back to the terminology sheet and just make sure you truly understand what that term means. So for setting, this is one that sometimes people overlook, one of the aspects of setting. I think that most people, when you say setting, automatically think of the place and the time, but the social environment or the mood or atmosphere is also part of the setting. So knowing that, when we look at Young Goodman Brown, what is the setting in terms of all of those aspects? So how is the mood and the feeling that you get from reading that, which is obviously going to be portrayed because of the diction that Hawthorne uses. So if he's using words that are dark and gloomy, then that's the setting. It's evoking a dark and gloomy tone. In addition, the setting is the time and the place that it was written. So think of the story and the setting in all of those ways. Symbolism, another term on here. So the symbolism is related to imagery. So what kind of imagery does Hawthorne use? What is something that sticks out in the story? I know one of the things that I always remember from this story is the names of the characters, like Faith, right? That could be a symbol. And also specifically with her character, Faith loses this ribbon. So what is the symbolism of her losing her ribbon after she's been in the forest? The plot, I even made this even more specific for all of you, so you kind of knew exactly what I meant by what part of the plot. I'm looking for what happened at the ending. What happened at the end of the story after Brown has experienced, he's gone to the woods and has seen all these people that he thought were good-hearted kind people, and he sees them doing a sinister act. How is he changed? How does the story end? And then the author, the family background. This is just something to remind you all that the author's background can play a role in their writing. Not everything that we read is like this. It's not always the author as the narrator. In some cases it is, but not always. So a lot of times it's like Young Goodman Brown. That's not a story about Nathaniel Hawthorne per se. It's a story about Young Goodman Brown, right? And Young Goodman Brown could, though, share qualities that Hawthorne has. So maybe Hawthorne, because of his family background, he had Puritan judges and he had judges that were part of the Salem witch trial. Maybe that affected him and made him see his family. He thought that they were good-hearted people. And then after learning more and more about his background and what his family did, he was almost, it was like the veil was lifted, right? So in every story that you read, it is important to think about the publication, so when it was written and where it was published, because that's going to give you a idea of who the audience is. So whenever I see something that says, oh, the audience could be anyone, it's true, it could be anyone, because I could just go out on the street and give a printout copy of a story to anybody, right? And they could read it as long as they understood how to read, obviously, that anybody could read it. But that's not what's being asked. When you see a question that says, who is the intended audience? You have to look at the publication information. So when was it written and where was it published? It plays a big role in answering that question. And it also, thinking about the author and their background, whether it was how they were raised, what education they received or did not receive, any kind of demons that they deal with themselves that may be then portrayed in their characters. All of that is really important into understanding the story. Okay, so moving on to where are you going? Where have you been? This has been compared to a fairy tale. And I'll just go ahead and tell you it's compared to Red Riding Hood. So think about that. How is this story kind of like that fairy tale that, is a children's tale? It's almost like a warning, right? So how is this compared to that fairy tale? And maybe you can compare it to another fairy tale as well, and that's fine. But Red Riding Hood is just one that has been used in different literary critiques of this story. And then the story title, so the story title is always one of those things that it makes me excited. When I'm researching, I always look for the title. If the title doesn't grab my attention, unfortunately, I usually just move on and continue researching, because as you all probably have seen, it seems to be an endless amount of articles and films and different things that you could research. So if we stopped and read everything, we'd never get through. And then research might become kind of boring, because then you're reading articles that you're thinking, oh my gosh, what a drag. I can barely read through this. I'm reading the same paragraph 5 times. If that's happening, then that's, you want to move on. I think that research should be fun. It shouldn't be torturous. So the story title gives us a good idea of what we're about to read. So when we research, we have an article title that gives us an idea of what we're going to read. In these short stories, these titles give us an idea. So what does where are you going, where have you been? What is that story title setting us up for? And this is one of the stories that I've seen in many different textbooks. So I have used this. When I taught at Daytona State, we used this. And I actually would play the Bob Dylan song in class. Now, not everyone's a fan of Bob Dylan. So some people are thinking, oh my gosh, turn it off. When's it going to end? But I like Bob Dylan. I like a big variety of music. I think that, we could all agree that music plays a huge role in our lives. We all probably like different types of music, but music plays a big role, and it plays a big role in an author's life too, right? So they may have heard a song and become inspired. So how does Bob Dylan's song kind of tie into the story title? What is the story title implying? So think about that. The next story, A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor, is a Southern Gothic genre. And we want to look back at symbolism again. So what is the imagery created in this story? Try to find a specific symbol that you can discuss in a short answer. Hint, hint. And then the plot. So how is the cause and effect? So what are different decisions that are made, and how are those decisions then, how does the story change because of these decisions made? A and P, the characters in this, narrator and Queenie are the two characters that I want you to focus on. So just think about who the narrator is. And then with Queenie, why is she named Queenie? What are some things that we can think about? Maybe Queen Bee, or how is a queen usually thought to be a queen of a country? So why is she named Queenie? And then irony. So how is the story ironic? Perhaps the ending would be the best part to kind of look at. How does it end ironically? For everyday use, there are 3 characters to pay attention to: Mama, Maggie, and Dee. So just get an idea of who each one of these characters are. For Maggie, how is what happened to her in her life, how has that changed her, and how has that formed her personality? For Dee, why does Dee change her name? So what did the old name represent to her, and why is she adamant about changing her name? All right, and the last 2, Bartleby the Scrivener. Once again, the story title, because I love talking about story titles. I want all of you to have really creative story titles for each one of your essays. Think of it as that's the first thing someone sees. So you don't want to say like paper 2. That's boring, right? I have no idea what that means. Paper 2, I know you're submitting paper 2 because that's where you're submitting into the Dropbox. So that's almost like redundant. We don't even need to say paper 2. So you want to be creative. So how does Bartleby the Scrivener set you up for what the story is going to be about? What does Scrivener mean? The word choice and the repetition that Melville uses. So what is some of the repeated phrase? What is a repeated phrase that is used in that story? And then the symbolism or imagery. So one of the images that is discussed in different literary criticism is the image of death. And how does Melville use Bartleby to have this image of death? So review that story for that. And the last story, the Lone Ranger and Tonto fist fight in heaven. So the story title and the tone. So what is the tone of the story? I think that it seemed like people really were able to grasp the tone. And after watching the video about Sherman Alexie, you kind of saw how his background and different demons that he's fighting with. And maybe stereotypically Native Americans, there's a lot of times people associate them with having alcohol problems. So how is that seen in this story? And then the title itself, it's kind of one of those titles that it's descriptive, but it's also setting us up for the Lone Ranger and Tonto. So who are these characters in the old films? Were they friendly? Okay, so if they were friendly, then why in this story are they said to be fist fighting in heaven? Is it showing that maybe the relations between Native Americans and white people were not as friendly as they were portrayed in Hollywood, right? So it's kind of an interesting title to set us up to know that it's going to be a different story than what we're used to seeing with the Lone Ranger and Tonto. So this was just a quick review because I wanted you guys to be able to focus in on some of the main aspects of each story. And I think that, as long as you read the stories and look over this study guide, that you're going to do fine. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'm always here to answer questions. And once again, just make sure you register for the exam. You have to register in order to take the proctored exam. And it is a federal guideline for online students to take one proctored exam. And this will be it. You will have no other exams. The final exam you can just take from your home. It's not proctored. So just make sure you have this one registered in time. Thank you so much.